Margaret Thatcher and I have been friends for many years. And as a person who is tremendously pressed, she still seems to find time for her friends. And I've been able to visit her here at number 10 Downing Street, the official residence of all British Prime Ministers, on many occasions in the past 3 years. It's one of the few houses which has survived from the early days of the Restoration, when George Downing, an American speculator, returned to Britain to make a fortune in the 17th century and built this little street.
Thank you so much. I'll take this. How are you?
Number 10 may have just about the best known front door in the world, but very few people know what lies behind it. It has so many memories of past prime ministers. There have been over 40 of them. But Margaret Thatcher is unique in being the first woman. And like Harry Neve, the mutual friend who introduced us, I think she's unique in many other ways as well. And that's why I'm here today, to talk to her about herself, her vision of life, and the sense of purpose that has brought her to the top of the stairs.
Oh, how nice
Hello,
to
Lawrence.
see me.
Welcome.
I'd love to know more about your father, as you remember him, because he started as a cobbler, didn't he? Or is that wrong?
My grandfather
was your
a cobbler. My father was born in a small village called Ringstead, and I remember visiting the house. It was a small cottage. And again, I remember the atmosphere. Children are very sensitive to atmosphere. It was always a family atmosphere in which everyone was interested in the children. Of course, there was no radio, there was no television. The life was a village life, and people were naturally interested in their children and in their family. So it was very much, it seemed, very much the centre, if not of their lives, the centre of their hopes. And when my father went out to work at the age of 13, he was not paid very much, and he moved to Grantham to become a manager. And he told me he was paid 12 shillings a week. And of that, 10 shillings a week went to your board and lodging, 1 shilling to savings, and only then did you spend. So that was the way they started. My mother was a seamstress. And I think it was a combination of their savings and my mother's savings that enabled them to have enough money to put down as a deposit on the shop and to borrow a good deal more. But they really had proved their worth by the saving and by their hard work. Both of them brought up in a strongly religious family. I think both very conscious that there was a lot more to life, and both very anxious to give it to us.
What is the first thing that you remember? Not a rational thing. What is the first thing that you remember in life? A sound or a colour? But just what was the first thing that you remember?
I can remember being taken out I can remember in one's pram being taken out for a walk, and just sitting up and looking around one. But I can remember a feeling both of wonder and of security.
It seems to me frightfully important that you start with a sense of wonder.
And a sense of security.
It seems the whole of life begins with a sense of wonder. But because I have here a picture of the place where you were born, and which moves me very much. Do you remember this? This is Grantham.
I remember it very well. That was my bedroom window.
What did you see from it?
I looked across So that was the Great North Road. It was on the Great North Road. And there were traffic lights on the corner, so we were very much brought up with the great lorries. Life was going on through this physical artery,
Yes.
which was the heart. But I looked across, straight across the road, to a church. It was a Roman Catholic church and the Roman Catholic Mass. So we had the two things. I remember this tree very well. This is winter. But that was a lime tree. It was a lovely lime tree.
Did it
And of
smell?
course, yes.
Because they've got lovely smell, haven't
And
they?
of course they have these most marvellous fresh green leaves when they open. And I can remember, again, one of my earliest memories, my father just lifting me high so that I could feel the early leaves. Later, of course, when it grew higher, they came and pruned the lower branches.
Doesn't it seem a long way from this house to where we are standing now? Because it feels much more like a home, indeed like a country home, a modest country home, than a sort of a prime ministerial establishment. Do you have a feeling like that about it yourself?
People always say that when they come here. It is, of course, although it's very grand in some ways, much more modest than many of the houses in which prime ministers live. But of course, in days gone by, they used to have large families here, large staffs, and they used to use these main rooms as living rooms. Now we use them as official reception rooms. But they were substantially remodeled for Walpole, and they've kept their proportion and their beauty. This is one of our Turners. I felt very strongly we should have some of our best pictures at number 10. This is the earliest one, but I think my favourite is the one over the fireplace, men with horses crossing a river. The colouring is lovely, and you have all the depth and perspective and the most beautiful trees. There's great competition for the Turners. They have 3 in the Paris embassy, and visiting there I said, you have 3 Turners, and I haven't any. So very quickly we got 3 Turners here. We used to have a number of Italian pictures in this room, and again I wanted ones by British artists, and they brought me 2 or 3 by Richard Wilson. The lighting is lovely, and the depth of the picture is beautiful. This desk is a very unusual one. You don't find repeats of it. It was specially made for Pitt, and it's just lovely. You see, it looks like
it's beautiful.
Drawers. It isn't. And more in here. This inkstand is one of the few pieces of silver that are permanently in number 10, apart from those in the cabinet room. This comes from the Treasury. We have to work very hard to extricate anything from the Treasury, even in number 10.
It's almost a feel of Pitt about
Yes.
it. It's so right for him. He must have been...
Prime Minister when we won the Battle of Trafalgar.
Yes.
Yes. And this is one of a pair, and the mirrors, one of a pair. The mirrors are Chippendale. Very impressive mirrors. They used to have, when I came here, a Rococo-style table, much too elaborate for my liking, and I wanted something much more British. So the Victorian Albert let me have this pair only just a few months ago. But again, it's beautiful. The proportions are lovely, and it's beautiful work. And I wanted just really the best of English furniture here, or Scottish furniture.
What period? Just forgive me for asking.
Adam.
I ought to know. It's Adam.
Yes.
Yes, it's beautiful.
It looks to me as if that's warping slightly. We must just have that
It's an incredible
attended
piece
to.
of work, that is.
Over there, this small table here is really Chinese Chippendale.
Yes, indeed.
It was part of a suite, the rest of which is just outside my study. It was made for Clive of India. So once again, it's a history of great men who have done great things. Now, when I came here, we had no original pictures of Nelson or Wellington, only copies. And I thought we ought to have original ones. So the National Maritime Museum let me have this one of Nelson. Such an enigmatic man, a so many very, very brilliant people are. But what's always struck me about it is one thinks of him as such a fantastic victor and man of war. But look at that sensitive face.
Well, this is what the paradox which hits one immediately, how somebody so frail with the imagination and sensitivity of that face could endure so much.
This is a picture of Wellington. I, after Falklands, thought of him very much because I was very upset at the people who lost their lives in Falklands. And then I thought of Wellington after the Battle of Waterloo. He walked round the battlefield totally and utterly sickened and grief-stricken by it. Over 22,000 dead, of course, in 2 days. And of course, he never fought another war again.
There's that wonderful remark of his, there's only one thing worse than a battle lost, and that's a battle won.
Yes.
Well, that was very exciting, seeing those things.
They're lovely.
They're absolutely incredible.
This is the largest. Isn't it beautiful? It's the
marvellous.
largest of the 3 reception rooms, designed by William Kent. You're quite right, it's dominated by this remarkable carpet. It's a Tabriz Persian, and it's always been a feature of number 10. But one day, I had some people into lunch, and there was an expert at Persian, and I asked him what it said here, because it's woven into the carpet. And it says that, by the person who wove it, "I have no place in the world save thy threshold." And it's made by a slave of the holy places, and the date on that is equal to 1520 AD.
Heavens.
So I said at once, if it's that old, we ought not to tread on it.
Yes.
So we got someone down from the British Museum to have a look, because the British Museum are expert at everything. And we were told immediately, oh, it's not the original. The British Museum had the original, and this was a copy. I was quite relieved. But it's 82 years old, so it's worn very well. You can see there are some lovely pictures in the room. And we have quite a number of Romney, Hopner, and this one here by Sir Joshua Reynolds of Lady Sunderland. The room used to end here, the whole house used to end here by these pillars until in the end of the 18th century it was extended and a new wing built, so which has 2 dining rooms, a small one and a large one, both of which we use officially. Here we have a working lunch at number 10, it's in the small one, and a state lunch, it's in the larger one. Let's go and look at the smaller ones. I've tried there to get some pictures and marbles of great scientists. Now, just let me tell you about the silver first, Lawrence. Again, it doesn't belong to number 10 because there was very little here. But a great friend of mine, Lord Brownlow, who lived, after all, only 3 miles away from where I was born, from Grantham Belton House, let me have this. And it has a history, too. It belonged to the Brownlow family from the days when they were the Cust family. And there was a Mr. Speaker Cust, of course, Speaker of the House of Commons. And in those days, apparently the Speaker had to provide his own silver. We do a lot of statecraft round this table. We have formal talks in my study and in the white drawing room. But somehow it's a narrow table, and it's very easy for talking. And we often have quite informal luncheon meetings here.
Do you get foreign statesmen
frequently,
here
all of a
too?
sudden, tongues are loosened and people talk.
Do you get foreign statesmen?
Oh, indeed,
here?
yes.
And,
Yes, indeed.
And are they impressed by it? Well, they must be.
They expect us to be rather cold and formal, and rather surprised when we're friendly and informal.
Oh, this would be a marvellous room
Yes.
for it. I don't see how one could feel outdistanced here. Lovely.
And then we're trying to make it a little scientific gallery as well. We've got 1 or 2 spaces still waiting. There is a picture of the Priestley who discovered oxygen.
Oh, yes.
And there Humphrey Davy, inventor of the miner's lamp, which saved so many lives. And perhaps our greatest scientist of all here, Isaac Newton.
That must give you great satisfaction to have him here.
Well, it does, bearing in mind again the connection with grandson.
I was wondering how the likeness corresponded to the statue near Grantham.
I think the face is similar. It's a full-length statue at Grantham. This is a much more informal one. And we're just really rather lucky to have it. It fits there perfectly.
Pity is separated from Faraday.
Well, Faraday, I got Faraday here too, also to come up here in the dining room. But he's come with a big granite plinth about that high, and the granite plinth weighs a half-ton, and so I'm afraid he will go straight through our floors. But he's on the ground floor, so everyone sees him.
And Prime Minister, was it Newton who was so full himself of the sense of wonder of which you spoke at the beginning, who first turned your imagination towards science?
Oh, he was a remarkable person in almost every way. Yes, because of his connection with Grantham, because one was already passionately interested in science in any event, because I had a marvelous teacher of chemistry, and that really unlocks the doors to almost every one of the sciences.
You were almost confronted daily with the statue of Newton in Grantham.
Oh, yes, indeed.
I
I passed it every day on my way to school. Look, this is a casket which used to be given to people who were given the freedom of the borough in Grantham. I have it on loan again from the present Lord Brownlow. And when I saw it, I was quite thrilled and said to him, look, for you, this is one of many of your possessions. For me, may I borrow it because it will mean so much to me, because there is the town hall of Grantham, which I knew and passed every day on my way to school. That is a statue of Newton.
Oh, that's where it stands.
That's
How
where it
marvellous,
stands.
confronting the
Yes,
town hall.
the town hall is wonderfully sited. And then on the other side, we have this lovely Belton house, which was built in the style of Wren, which I also knew. As a child, they held great fêtes there and shows on bank holidays. And I remember all the school children went into the grounds there in 1935 when we had a great tea party for the Silver Jubilee of King George V. My father took me about a great deal. I can remember being taken to meet Herbert Morrison. When he was Home Secretary, this was beginning of wartime, and he came to our town to look at our arrangements for ARP. Air raid precautions. People don't know these days what ARP meant. And I was taken to meet him. We were active in trying to save money. And then my father was mayor towards the end of the war. And so many of the aircraft, the bombers went from near Grantham. We knew many of the pilots. And I remember after that very famous and ingenious and scientific raid on the dam.
Oh, the dam busters, yes.
Which was led by Guy Gibson.
Did you know
my
some
father,
of the pilots
yes, entertained
personally?
him to a great reception in Grantham. Yes, we knew quite a number of the pilots.
And you must have known many who were killed. And you must therefore, in those days, have had your first encounter with death.
I remember it very vividly because, again, it was the same thing in the Falklands. It's the young people who bear the brunt of the risks of war. And Cranwell, of course, where many of them were trained, was not far from us. And you would know quite a number of them, and all of a sudden you would say, look, what's happened to so-and-so? And there was a certain language that developed, and it would be, oh, he bought it.
One never gets used to losing people, does one?
No, and yet they knew they had to carry on.
Yeah.
And they did. But this has so many, many memories for me. And I remember, too, the great victory parade and the fantastic relief. And we thought that we would never have any more worries when peace had come, or that any of the worries that we had would be small compared to those which we had endured. And I think it takes you quite a long time and quite a little experience in politics to know that the battles of peace are even more difficult to solve than the battles of war.
Yeah. Prime Minister, it must have been a tremendous shock to you, therefore, in a time of so-called peace, to lose somebody like Harry Neve, who had survived the war, who had such a gallant war. And it seems to me such an ironic, so tragic, that a man like that should have died in what we call a time of peace.
Oh, it was... I couldn't believe it almost. You know, one believed it intellectually, but one just couldn't take it in emotionally, because he'd escaped Hitler. He escaped from Colditz. He was so extremely brave. And of course, only a coward could have got him. That was a picture of the whole family, with my elder sister, Muriel, who by that time was away, learning to be a physiotherapist. I remember my mother making both her dress and mine. I was very thrilled with that dress. It was a dark blue velvet one, and I loved it for many years.
How old were you?
How old was I? About 18. It looks very young and earnest, doesn't it? And then... oh, let's move on a few years. That was when I was married to Dennis. It was a very cold day.
In Grantham?
No, I was married in London, City Road, Methodist Church, London. It was a bitterly cold day, so I was in a long velvet dress. Again, I loved velvet. And this Gainsborough-style hat. And I was married on December the 13th. And as I was born on October the 13th has never held any fears for me as a number.
Prime Minister, this shakes me a little, because I was born on December the 13th and I was married on October the 13th. Perhaps
Just
the
the other
13th
way
has
around.
brought me here to you today.
Really? Well, no superstition attaches to either of us on 13. Isn't that remarkable? Then 2 years later, the twins were born. That was Mark, and that was Carol. I'm very glad we've got that picture. They hate it when I show.
You have no difficulty ever in telling them apart, although they were twins.
No. I think any mother of twins who are not identical will tell you that they have their own personalities from day one. Really do.
That's very reassuring.
Then I became a member of Parliament. That was me turning up to the House of Commons, October 1959.
You don't look the least bit nervous. I would have been shaking at the knees.
Well, that was just outside. I think I probably was shaking at the knees. Interesting, in those days, you know, it was a done thing to wear a hat. And so we turned up, and those were the pearls which Dennis gave me the day the children were born. This was just the day after I made my maiden speech. It was a maiden speech which went rather well, and I did the unusual thing of introducing a bill on my maiden speech, a bill which admitted the press to meetings of local councils and committees. And I think the press mustn't have had very much else to write about. Anyway, they came and took a picture of me at home with the children. It's a picture I love.
It's an enchanting picture.
Isn't it lovely? Mark and Carol looking really rather full of wonder. at all of these people who had suddenly appeared. This is another family picture which I'm very fond of. I think it's good of all four of us and typifies the family at our home in Kent, in Holwood Park.
This is where I would like to go back to your university days just for a moment. What do you think is the greatest thing Oxford gave you?
Oh, so very, very many things. To me, of course, it was the most marvellous privilege and opportunity to be able to go there at all. And my father's dream. When I got there, I think the first thing I learned was that for the first time in my life, you're totally divorced from your background. You go there as an individual. So what did we learn? We learned that it's what each person is that counts, and what they make of themselves and the contribution they make. We learned that your own particular faculty and subject may be the centre of your life, but it's a part of a whole. I learned a great deal about politics. I learned, too, that there were people with very different opinions. And then I also belonged to the Bach choir, because, again, the music's still coming out. And
Bach meant most to you of all
I
the musicians
love
today.
Bach. The great chorales are marvellous. So it was just really the opening to my life.
Now you went to your first job, which sounds to me to have been very, very hard work indeed. You went as a researcher, didn't you?
I went as a research chemist in industry, again in plastics. It was a thing of the future. And worked in industry. Thank goodness I did work in industry, because it was a completely different experience. When you're working in pure research or trying to find out the laws of nature, it was quite different to go and work in industry, where you were trying constantly to produce new things that would sell. That was why you were there. And that was a totally different experience. And early on, again, I carried on politics in universities, you know, and then joined the local political societies and became active.
This is to me where we come really to the what shall I say, the mature climax of your career, the moment you decided all this was going to be put at the service. You were going to translate this into politics. Was there any particular incident which helped you to release, to precipitate this, acted as a catalyst?
Really, there were two occasions. One when I was still at university, and also from Grantham and from the same school. There was another great friend of mine at university. I was at Somerville. She was a Lady Margaret Hall. But again, it helps in life if you've always got another friend who've known the same things. And in the recess, we used to meet. Her father was a vicar, and they had a great, I think it was a 21st birthday party to which I was invited. And it was quite a way away, so we stayed the night. And the great thing about parties isn't the party, it's really congregating afterwards in the kitchen. Being a vicarage, you had quite a big kitchen. And you just sit down and you talk and you get whatever there is to eat, or a cup of tea sandwich, and you just sit down and talk. And of course I was talking about politics, I so often was. And one other person there just suddenly said, "Oh, well then, you'd like really to become an MP?" And it kind of crystallized everything which I wished to do. And I said, yes, I would like to. And I still kept in touch with the Graduate Society, Conservative Graduate Society of Oxford. And therefore we went to party conferences. And I remember one year, it was at Llandudno, I think it was 1948. And there was someone else in the Graduate Society, and I was sitting in the hall listening to the debates, not taking part in that one. And next to me was the chairman of Dartford, the Dartford Conservative Association. And on the other side, one of my friends from Oxford, and we all three walked out in the lunch and break down the Llandudno pier. And my Oxford friend said to the chairman of Dartford, I hear you're trying to find a candidate to fight the next election. Oh yes, said John Miller, my chairman. We shall need a very able young man. It's a very tough industrial area. Oh, said my Oxford friend, would you not consider an able young woman? Oh, no, it's not that sort of area at all. Oh, well, just would you consider her? Well, she can apply. And then he said, well, it was me. You see, I had not thought of applying at all. And then they brought along the woman's chairman, and she looked at me, and then they said, well, just apply. And that was how really I came to apply. I think there were 23 who applied, and quite by chance I was chosen.
And then did you have a feeling from that moment on that this was really the way you were going?
Yes, I did. I actually met Dennis there as well.
Yes.
Again, the night I was adopted as a candidate, I had to travel there and to get back to London and then back to Colchester where I was living. And someone said, I know someone who'll bring you back, who'll run you back to London, you can catch a train. And it was Dennis. We weren't engaged until 1951, but I knew him very well. Again, we had the same common interest. Mm-hmm. He didn't half ask me some tough economic questions.
Yeah,
very good practice. But isn't it strange things just happen? But that was how it happened. I really could never leave politics alone. It had always, from my early young days, this total fascination. It wasn't that I went into it, it was that I really couldn't somehow keep out of it. And then I really just took advantage of the opportunities that came my way. And always, even though he didn't win in 1950, we didn't win in 1951, I always just kept on at it.
You won in 1953.
No, 1959.
59, as long as that.
I kept on at it. The children were born in 1953.
Yes, that's what I was.
But I had to make, when the children were born, had been still doing my legal studies. Children were born when I was halfway through.
Yes, I remember Dennis's fantastic remark. He says, in May, intermediate bar examinations.
Yes.
In August, the twins. And in December, the final bar examinations.
That's right. I again remember lying in hospital. I had a seizure with them, and of course they become the total centre of your life. And I remember thinking, if I don't, now I'm in hospital, actually fill in the entrance form for the final of the law, I may never go back to it. But if I fill in the entrance form now, pride will not let me fail. Mm-hmm. And so I did. I had a feeling that with very young children, I could not go back immediately into politics because I wanted to be with them. I wanted to shape and influence their lives. I wanted... Well, you get so much from being a mother as well as giving. And they were small. They were very small. They're only 4 pounds. They're going to need a lot of looking after. And, well, of course, they do become the centre of your life, and you live for them, as you've never lived for anything or anyone else, both of you. It's a wonderful thing about parenthood. And yet I knew that I had something in addition to give, and I knew that I must exert myself to use it. I was just very lucky with Dennis. He's been absolutely marvellous, and always encouraged me to use all one's talents. And then we had a marvellous family. Everything just came right, and then the children were 6, and then Finchley became vacant, and I never thought I had a chance for that, but I went. And I just tried, and I won the seat, and the people there are marvellous too.
And I won't bother you with all the stages from the moment you arrived in Parliament, but it seems to me that really a particularly trying, crucial moment where you really found yourself, as it were, politically through the fire. was at the Department of Education. Wasn't that a very difficult assignment?
It was a very difficult assignment. The first assignment I had, of course, was from Harold Macmillan, when I did the Ministry of Pensions and National Insurance, only 2 years after I came into the House. And I had 3 different ministers in that job. Very interesting. John Boyd Carpenter, my first political boss, was a marvelous teacher. Fantastic man. Total command of his department. And then, after a year, Harold Macmillan changed his government radically. It was known as the Night of the Long Knives. I mention it for this reason. If, during the lifetime of the same government, you've served 3 different ministers, you see how the civil service works. Because the advice they gave, I saw it vary from minister to minister. And I used to sit there sometimes and say, that's not what you said to the last minister. You're giving him totally different advice. Why? And gradually they said, well, the last minister wouldn't have accepted that advice. So I said, well, you're now trying it on the present one. And gradually it was the most fascinating constitutional experience.
Very important.
Yes, it was. Back to education. Thank goodness again I was given it. It's extremely important. Again, at a critical time. There was a great battle on. It was part of this equalization rage of the time that you mustn't select by ability. After all, I had come up through selection by ability. To me, what mattered was not where you came from, but if you were able to do certain things, then the world opened, and somehow education was given to you to bring forward those talents.
What did it do to you, that experience?
It makes you stand up and go on standing up for the things in which you believe, regardless. Iron entered my soul. You need a touch of steel to put through the things that you believe in. Otherwise,
not in yourself.
you'd just be like India rubber and turn any way.
I remember Lloyd George making a remark about Ramsay MacDonald that he proved that the one way in which iron enters the soul is by sitting on fences.
Oh, indeed,
And
yes.
you
And not coming down on one side or the other.
Yes, you certainly haven't sat on a fence.
That's
and you
right.
missed out on the
I
iron.
know. Isn't it? A mugwump is a man who has his mug on one side of the
and
fence
his
and his wump on the other.
wump on
Yes,
the
I
other,
remember
yes.
Manishin was saying that.
But then the next, seems to me, the next major battle, and which must be a very difficult one, because you seem to have done this again, as you've so often done, out of your own intuitive self, is in running for the leadership of the Conservative Party against Ted Heath.
We had lost a vital election, and again, history would have been different had we won it. The party was insisting that Ted put up as leader again. And if they insisted, then it seemed to me that someone had to put up against him. I obviously by that time was beginning to have some different views of different emphasis. I had thought that others would put up, and possibly that Keith Joseph would put up. And there were demonstrations outside his house and everything else. And then all of a sudden, he just came along to me and said, look, I want you to know that I have decided I'm not going to stand for the leadership. And quite instinctively, I said, well, I'm sorry, Keith. Why not? He said, well, I just can't. I can't tell you quite why, but I just can't. I don't think it was wholly to do with those demonstrations, but he realized the tension on him for about 3 days. And I said straight away, well, if you're not, I'm going to. And after a few days, Ari Neve came along, and he said, tell me, who is running your campaign? I said, running my campaign? I haven't got anyone to run my campaign. Do I need a campaign? He said, well, I think I'd better run it for you.
I remember Harry telling me during the election he was convinced that you couldn't possibly lose.
But I don't forget that final vote. I was just waiting in a tiny little room upstairs in the House of Commons. And Harry just came in and said, "You are now leader of our party." And until that time, I couldn't believe it. I had never expected the leadership, let alone it to happen that way. It's rather different coming to power as leader of the opposition, because so much of what you have to do is comment, criticize, and talk. And all my upbringing has been not as a talker, except as a debater, but as wanting to do something and being constructive about it. So I found those 4 years in opposition very difficult, but one used them constantly to enlarge one's experience of international affairs, one's experience of getting a view of a whole group of a shadow cabinet, and of taking one or two quite fundamental decisions about the way we should go, and as a time of preparation for government.
Thank you. This is our cabinet room. It's a very modest room, as you can see, at least compared with that of some other heads of government, but it's a room full of history. It used to be smaller than it is now. It used to end here, across there, and then at the end of the 18th century, these two columns were put in, and that extension was added. And those two doors go through to my private secretaries. The blotters here look very nice when you turn them over. They're Cabinet Room First Lord, reminding us that I inhabit this house as First Lord of the Treasury, as well as of Cabinet Minister. There's a silver box there belonging to William III. There's a candlestick just behind which belonged to Pitt. We always have them on this table, and they're just part of the history of the room. I used to sit in this chair when I was first a member of the cabinet, which is why I stop here automatically.
Well, I think I bow to it too, myself.
I was Secretary of State for Education, so I know what it's like to be in another chair. Then I graduated to this chair, which is the only chair in the room with arms, and is, of course, the Prime Minister's chair. It's been recovered. It's the one where Winston sat, and many of his predecessors before him. Possibly the first one, Sir Robert Walpole, who came into this house in 1735. It's a great comfort to many of us that he stayed here for 21 years.
Yes, of course, he was the first tenant of Downing.
He was the first tenant of Downing Street.
The first one was an American called Downing, really. At least he came from Harvard, didn't he?
He built Downing Street.
Yes.
That's the house at the front. This really belongs to the house at the back, looking over Horse Guards Parade.
Yes.
And when King George II purchased them for the Prime Minister, he purchased this one and the front one, and they were joined together.
Well, he very successfully switched sides, didn't he?
Downing switched sides to whoever was in power.
Now, if you had lived in that period, would you have been a Cavalier or a Roundhead?
Oh,
your instinct.
No slightest shadow. I've been a Cavalier.
The table was not Churchill's table. What happened
there
to that?
used to be a rather nice polished table in here, but it was not apparently easy to see all members round an oblong table. So Hal Macmillan had this boat-shaped top put on, and it's been like that ever since. Thank you. Please sit down. See, here one can have a command of the whole of the cabinet room table.
Well, it interested me at once, Prime Minister. You don't sit at the head, but you sit at the centre, as near to the middle as you can.
Very much better. You can see everyone
Yes.
here and there, and you're more a part of what is going on and can sense and feel what is happening.
But when you sat here for the first time in Winston's chair, how many, were you the only woman in the room?
Yes, I was.
How many men?
21, and of course some secretariat. So, but you don't think of it that way.
And yet it's, isn't it rather frightening that you've had no model, as it were? You men, when they come here, have some tradition. They've learnt it at school, at their clubs. But for the first time, you come here with no model to go by, as it were? Or were the males sufficient of a model?
Well, I was, of course, a member of a previous cabinet, so I knew the drill, as it were. And when you become a parliamentary secretary, which I did way back in Harold Macmillan's government, you attend a lot of cabinet committees, which are not here but elsewhere, but you know how the system works. I think this is one of the differences between ourselves and, for example, the American system. You can have a president who's never been part of a cabinet and doesn't really know quite how the system works as between the executive, which is the cabinet, and Congress. We've come up through the system, 1959 to 1979. I'd been in Parliament 20 years. I'd been a parliamentary secretary. I'd been a Secretary of State. So each stage is like climbing up a ladder, a few more rungs. But it's all part of one's experience, which is so very different from that of our American friends, who can come to it totally fresh and really might have to spend a few months learning about it, whereas we're steeped in it. Of course, things have changed, so many of my predecessors had nothing of the strain which we had to bear. I think it was only in the post-war period that prime ministers have to answer questions twice a week in the House, every Tuesday and Thursday. And sometimes when I read of the life of my predecessors, they had a lot of servants here. Parliament only sat part of the year. But then they didn't have all the media work we have to do. They didn't. Some of them have television. I mean, Winston didn't have television. No. Harold Macmillan did. And we will have about 3,000 or 4,000 letters every week to open and to answer, quite apart from the parliamentary work. The cabinet room's where most government decisions are taken, but this is where I work, in my study. These, of course, are the boxes in which all my papers come. I usually work on them very late at night. There are 2 or 3 every evening, any time up until 2 o'clock in the morning.
But they leave you time for thinking things out here as well, I presume.
Yes, I think most of the thinking is done really at weekends. We do in this room a great deal of discussion. All ministers come here and see me, various leaders of industry, other statesmen, and all internal meetings. Oh yes, we have to make time for thinking.
And you often go on until 2 in the morning?
Quite frequently, indeed usually.
And how early do you start?
How early? Well, that just depends. If I've got through it, I will not be on the job again till about 8:30.
Well, that's quite early enough for most people, early. I think.
Yes. Have a look at this. It is the Paris. It's taken from a photograph raising the flag on the Falklands in San Carlos Bay soon after the landing. And I think it just portrays everything that's marvelous about the British soldier. And all the dignity is portrayed there. The dignity, the calm, and the kindliness.
I want to take up this capacity for heroism, which was revealed into the Falklands, and talk to you about a problem which I know has haunted you and haunts many of us who fought in wars. What happens to this heroism in peacetime?
In wartime, you have a very, very clear and immediate objective. It is defined, and everyone knows what they have to do, and the role of each is carefully worked out. And after all, you have to go that way to survive. So there's an urgency, an immediacy, and a clarity about it. When we turn to peace, we have to formulate our own objectives. we have to make ourselves live up to the best that is within us. That is much, much more difficult. There's no immediate problem of survival. Yes, we survive. It's a question of each one. It's a question of creating your own inner challenge and making yourself go on.
Prime Minister, this seems to me also to be fundamentally and ultimately a religious question, because this concept that you've outlined is really the heart of Christianity, the creation of an individual who will take responsibilities of his life and time, as it were, upon himself and contain them in his own life.
I think it is quite true to say that the religion of both the Old and New Testament have played an enormous part in the life of this country, indeed have been quite fundamental to it. Because even though people did not go to church, they gave standards which were somehow totally accepted by our people and actually practiced. But I think one of the distinguishing mark between a free society and a dictatorship, whether it's a fascist or communist dictatorship, is the values of a free society like ours come from religion. They do not come from the state. And of course, the heart of the Christian message is that each person has the right to choose, and in choosing develops his character. And it is each person that matters. I'm just groping after those two lines from, I think it's the second verse of that marvelous hymn which starts, I vow to thee my country, all earthly things above. Then goes on in the second verse, but there's another country I've heard of long ago. And towards the end of that verse, it comes out, but soul by soul and silently, her shining bounds increase, and her ways are ways of gentleness, and all her paths are peace. There is the message, soul by soul. And you tend, if life is slightly easier, not to create the challenge for yourself, and it tends only to come if you believe in something which is greater than yourself.